не имел того детства, которое бы он мог запомнить на всю жизнь, вряд ли сможет по-настоящему творить. У меня такое впечатление. Ну, кстати, это не совсем оригинально.
I've been thinking about this for the past decade of my life, and over those 10 years I read around 200 books on Russia, its history, its culture, its literature, its philosophy, and in this video I would like to share with you 7 books that I believe explain why Russia is so different in terms of culture from what we see on news very often. But before that, I would like to give you a little bit of context of who I am and why my story matters. Right, here is my story. My life is an amalgam of 4 different cultures. That's why I always felt as an outsider. I was born in Armenia but grew up in Moscow. I did my university degree in Prague, and today I live and work in London. Essentially, in less than 3 decades of my life, I interacted deeply with 4 different countries, with different languages, unique ways of thinking, and unique ways of looking at the world. I call this slow travel. It allows you to get fully engrossed into each place. Funnily enough, for Russians I'm Armenian, for British I'm Russian, and for Americans I'm European. Bad side of this is that in each of these places I feel like an outsider, a person who just stands on the margins and observes. The good side of this is that it gave me an exceptional experience of seeing the world through the eyes of different cultures. It allowed me to notice peculiarities in each place that others failed to see. And what is most important of all, it helped me to understand a famous saying that only by traveling you can understand what is not right with where you are from. I don't know if I'll be able to record the video right here, but I'll try because it is very quiet and I'm still very shy recording video in public places. There is a person who tries to learn to play piano right here in the church. I'll show you later, but the first book that I would like to suggest you to read is Tchakovsky's Letters from Russia. Tchakovsky was 19th century French aristocrat who traveled to the Tsarist Russia and wrote about his experiences of what he saw, how people thought at the time. This is a unique piece of travel writing, first of all because it is brilliantly written, it is so easy to read, it has so many wonderful quotes that describe Russia and its essence. This is not ordinary travel writing. This is travel writing that explains Russians throughout the centuries. So if you would like to understand how Russia operates, what is it like, this book still remains very relevant to our time. The next book on this list is written by Isaiah Berlin, who was a philosopher and historian of ideas. The book is called Russian Thinkers, and for a very long time I was looking for a book that would explain Russian philosophy, Russian way of thinking, and this book is just a perfect introduction for anyone who tries to understand Russian philosophy, Russian way of thinking. Most of the Russian philosophy is hidden in Russian literature, and it is very difficult to dissect certain philosophical ideas on your own. What Isaiah Berlin does in that book is that he tells you how Russian philosophy was born through the lens of social changes, through the lens of history, through the lens of what Russians took from the West and what they adopted and changed to suit the Russian realities. He looks at people such as Gogol, Tolstoy, Herzen, and it is an incredibly interesting book. It is impossible to exclude the book by Alexander Solzhenitsyn from this list. I mean his Gulag Archipelago. It's a book that completely changed my political stance. In its essence, this book tells us about the network of labor camps in the Soviet Union that kept political prisoners, tortured them, made them work so hard that they died. Solzhenitsyn's book is more than just a documentation of labor camps that killed millions of people. Solzhenitsyn's book tells you how your country, wherever you are from, can get to this point. There are many sentences in this book that had a strong impression on me, but there is one sentence that really knocked me off. He said that one of the most dangerous things that you can say that, oh, this could never happen here. People from France, Germany, from United States, or from all over the world might read the Gulag Archipelago and say, oh, this is a very Russian thing, only Russians could go through. But what Alexander Solzhenitsyn tells us and demonstrates through 600 pages of book, no country, no society, no culture is immune to the mistakes, to the brutalities and tortures that happened in the Soviet Russia. It is a must-read to every conscious, politically active, thinking person. Next book on this list is by my favorite Joseph Brodsky. I really love his essays. He has 2 volumes of essays that I would recommend anyone to read. The first one is called Less Than One, and the second one is called On Grief and Reason. I remember when I finished reading this selection of essays, I was so shaken by his radical individualism of being able to stay an independent person, character, to maintain your integrity despite of all adversities that he faced in his life. He was a poet in the Soviet Union and he lived in St. Petersburg. But as it was with many people who called themselves intelligentsia, who tried to remain independent in their way of thinking, Soviet Union rejected people like that. He was forced to leave his motherland, and it was a very difficult thing for a poet to leave his country, where people talk and speak the language that you compose your poems in. I would like to read a quote that I really love, and in order to not to make a lot of mistakes, I would like to read it off my phone. In one of his essays, he says that the surest defense against evil is extreme individualism, originality of thinking, whimsicality, even, if you will, eccentricity. I don't know how, but Joseph Brodsky managed to keep his integrity despite of all political oppression he faced in the Soviet Union. I believe that our character is revealed the best when we have to face an adversity, and I think the adversities that come spontaneously, unexpectedly, are the best ones that reveal what kind of person you are, what are your principles, what can you sacrifice. And the next book that I would like to share with you, I think, describes the Russian state of mind, the Russian character in the face of adversity the best. It is Vassily Grossman's book called A Writer at War. It is a collection of a diary notes that he made when he fought on the Eastern Front against Nazis when Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in 1941. It's an incredible book, and I really enjoyed reading, and it is not surprising, but every book on Russia is not easy to read. Vassily Grossman's book can tell you what is it like to be Red Army soldier fighting against Nazis when you have Hitler in front of you and Stalin behind you. The soundtrack for this video is being sorted right now by an old man who is learning how to play piano, and he plays really beautifully. The next book that I would like to share with you is called The Young Stalin, written by Simon Sebag Montefiore. It is an incredible book. This story about Stalin and his youth, of how he first planned to become a priest and a poet, and then became a gangster who robbed banks and plotted revolutions, is just incredible story, and it has to be non-fiction in order to be believable. The Young Stalin reveals a lot about human nature, about how sometimes the forces of history and the forces of our character are clashing together, because the Stalin, when in his youth, was very ambitious, very strong and charismatic character, and he could have become a poet like Byron or Shelley, but due to life circumstances, due to his surroundings, he became a gangster who robbed a bank, who had the belief in equal society, and therefore he wanted to topple the Tsarist regime, which for him stood for all the inequalities and injustices. And then he became who we know him right now. We know him as a person who is responsible for millions of deaths, but this story is just incredible story, not only about Russia, but also about human nature in general. As I said, about the clashes between forces of history and forces of our destiny. I wanted to mention this book right after the book on young Stalin because, as I said, the life of Stalin was very much influenced by the forces of history. The poet and the priest that he could have become were killed by political tyrant that he had become. But in contrast to Stalin, Dmitri Shostakovich, who was a wonderful Soviet composer, his story is the reverse of Stalin. He could have become not a tyrant, but at least a servant to the Soviet regime. But because of his personal integrity, because of his strength of his character, he remained loyal to his own destiny. His inner poet, in his case of a composer, wasn't killed in contrast to Stalin by the forces of history. I wanted to end this list on this book because I think all of us partially have this choice between choosing on what is going to have an influence more on our life. Is it going to be the forces of history, the forces of chance, the forces of chance determinism, or is it going to be our own choice?